Okay, so on your sheet here is this, are these notes for it. Uh, okay, there it is. The fastest way to desaturate a color is to mix it with its complement. The complement contains the two remaining primary colors in the color wheel. So it's as if you are incorporating the rest of the color wheel into the mix. So it is this kind of sense that it is the whole color world contained in an idea of a complementary axis, right? You've got the primary and then the whole other end of the color wheel, basically. Um, Two perfect complements mixed in exact proportions should theoretically lead an achromatic gray. This is difficult to achieve due to temperature bias in parent colors and also just our abilities to mix things perfectly. Let me show you what that might be like. Is that here you have red, green, orange, blue, yellow, purple, and somewhere in the middle there, if I kind of blank them all out, that should theoretically be kind of a perfect, kind of slightly dark gray. You can probably see that there's a little bit of temperature bias in them already, but they're getting pretty close to kind of looking like each other in that way, right? You don't really see it when you look at the whole range of it there so much. Um, so in theory, this kind of middle position should kind of be a color without color, kind of a gray. Like I said, it's not really perfectly possible in dealing with paint. Again, it's got these compromises. It's hard to make paint do exactly what you want, like you could on something like Photoshop if you really kind of did the math on the numbers first. Um, Mixing two complements in different proportions yields an extensive range of colors with a variety of levels of saturation from muted colors through chromatic grays to achromatic grays. So supposedly achromatic grays is the middle. Not quite, but getting close to it. Any two significant different colors mixed together will yield a spectrum of subtle colors yield bridge tones. So in a sense, these colors here are all a bridge between those two complements. And what they're doing is giving you, in a sense, a whole complete color world, a color harmony that could be really interesting to use as a tool as a painter. When you have two complements, they're most active in proximity to each other, right? If you put a yellow and a purple together, you're having this incredible kind of burst of energy between them as they're kind of opposing each other. So they're most active next to each other, but they're most inactive when you actually mix them together. So that's a kind of an interesting thing about the two routes that you could kind of go with deploying these kind of colors in an artwork, right? You can have a a color harmony, a color scheme that is kind of based mostly on something like red and green, and then you have all of this other incredibly beautiful subtle colors that kind of orchestrate between those two poles. So it's an idea of a harmony. We're going to definitely talk about that more next week. So how do you do this project? So this is a 15-step gradation between one primary color and its complement. So the first example would be this yellow and its complement, purple, here. Mix enough of the complement so that you do not have to mix more of it halfway through the project. So this is where the little cups or something like this is useful to kind of mix enough of it. This is one line of gradations, just like this one, or this one you may choose, or this one you may choose, not all three, please. So how do you actually do this? First thing is to choose one primary color of any, I say here, of the 6 co-primaries. That means, for instance, that yellow was that one. You don't have to make a perfect yellow, so-called, between mixing those two. You just pick any one of your 6 co-primary colors and start from there. We're not really worried too much about temperature bias exactly in this thing. So I'm letting it kind of slide in a sense. And that's what the co-primaries are about, is temperature bias. So there's that yellow, maybe something like ultramarine would be good for your blue. And then I think like maybe that was the carmine or something like that. Crimson, sorry. So these are your out of the tube colors. You got that, no problem. You can start with that. And then first thing you have to do is, once you've made that first choice, is that you have to mix the complement. And every one of you is going to do that to a different degree, to a subjective spot, right? You're going to make this kind of orange however best you can. You want to kind of make it feel like maybe looking at your color wheel would be useful to kind of give you that middle position let's say, of what the middle position orange would be or a middle position green, because you want it to be kind of a pretty green and not too much a blue green or not too much a yellow green, etc. So you're having to mix that complement, and that's not necessarily that easy. You know, that purple is, remember how weird we get our purples? This is probably a nicer purple than you might get, but try and get, the first task is to kind of get that complement mixed with a kind of a good amount of precision. So then you've got your materials. Those are the only two things you're going to use for the whole line. So paint a swatch of the primary and a swatch of the complement, at least I say 1.5 by 1 inches. So what you might do is just kind of make a grid like you've been doing of about that size. So you make sure that you paint a swatch that's at least big enough for you then to eventually cut down. This is another project where I would like you to do it as separate bits, making your kind of gradient runs as slowly you mix from one thing, because what you're being asked to do in the end is come up with 15 perfect steps. That's really, really hard to do, just kind of mixing it on the paper one next to each other. I can guarantee you that you're going to have a big, you know, huge lump of the yellows over there if you try and do it. Whereas if you do it on your squares, you're off your sheet, then you can then curate those out. So this is another one where I'm asking you to do it as separate pieces, bits, swatches that you paint, and then you can kind of cut them out, stack them, and find the perfect 15. So make your little squares that you're going to paint on at least 1.5 by 1, because at the bottom there, number 6, we're eventually going to cut it down to 1 inch by 3/4 inch slices. Okay. So that's number 2 there. Number 3, mix a very small amount of the primary into the complement, just enough so that there's a discernible difference. So just enough primary into the complement. So that's just a little bit of yellow into the complement, which is the purple. Paint that, and then maybe a little more of your primary, paint that. So you're slowly taking these steps towards the center. Maybe at some point get somewhere where it feels like the center and stop, and then come from the other end. Take your primary and mix a little bit of the complement into it, and then a little more, a little more, a little more. You know, think you probably want to have at least 20 swatches or more to choose from to get the kind of the right selection in the end. Continue to mix colors working from the primary. So think of it as coming from either end, basically, until you reach somewhere. You probably know you've met the middle when you find you kind of ended up with the same color from either end, right? Again, the trick is you're only using those two things. Here's your, let's call it this, your purple mix, let's say, and your tube of yellow, or maybe this is your orange mix. You're only using those two materials. So the good thing about that is you don't have much possibility of getting a kind of a contamination of another color. You'll pretty much always be on the right railroad track going down towards where you want to get. And then in the end, you're going to stack them all up and curate the best 15 and cut them into chips and glue them down. This example I have is, I think, a little bit larger, but that size I gave you of making them 1 inch by 3/4 inch will perfectly fit on one of your 12-inch sheets of Bristol. It will fit. So you don't have to put it on a whole sheet. You can just but put it on another piece of white Bristol so that you have the kind of area surrounding it nice and white. Okay, any questions about that first project or what you're going to do? That's kind of what we're going to work on today during class time. No? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to what we're going to be doing for the work after that. And you can probably rewatch this on the demo video on YouTube if you need to get a refresher. I think you might. It's a hard one. Okay, that's the first project. The second one is what I gave you this template for. So this is a thing I have on Moodle, and I emailed it to you. You don't really need to print this out because you're not going to stick stuff down to it, and it's just squares, so you can just do those as measurements. But it's very important to look at this as a kind of a map system for you to keep track of what you're doing. Let me jump ahead to what the thing looks like, which is this. This is a version of it, one of the choices you have. So this is called a gradient grid between complements with white. And so basically it's made out of just a couple of components. And so this is where it's really important to kind of follow this thing to help you figure out how to do it. Again, you want to paint these as swatches on a separate piece of paper. Maybe make the squares that you do about 2 inches square so that you can cut them down to this 1.5-inch size. So the first one's very easy. That's white. That's right up there. Then your primary color down here. So let me put these side to side. I think they're a little flipped. They're a little flipped, but so that would be the yellow is the primary. So that's easy right out of the tube. The yellow's right out of the tube. Likewise, the last one, you can pick any one of your 6 co-primaries for your pick a primary. And then here is the complement. So it's similar what you were doing on your line, your gradient line. Maybe I would suggest try a different color, different complement primary combination for the thing, just to kind of get the full experience of what kind of colors you're going to get in between. So white, yellow, it's complement. So again, you're mixing enough of this to kind of save, right? And then this up here is the equal mix of primary and complement. So again, I'm sorry this is a little bit flipped from the map, but the corners are still going to be the same. So this is a kind of an equal mix where you don't feel that it's too much too yellow or too much too purple in this instance. Show you another one here. Here's one where they had a stronger purple, for instance. But here is a nice red to green one. So here's the primary, there's white, and there is a kind of a mixed green that they made. And there is the intermix between those things. So that is kind of like, where's my other piece here? Okay. So here is like how I'm starting to do it. Start with the real basic corners there. Right out of the tube, right out of the tube, the complementary that you're mixing, and then the mix of those two. And I would say it's really useful to perhaps kind of put some labeling on your sheet as you're doing this so you can kind of keep track of where you are. So that's not too hard. The first gradient that you're going to want to do is, let's say, between the primary and the white. That's pretty simple, right? It's just the kind of the tints of that color. The thing that's starting to get tricky is that of these three, you want to kind of save some of that material and keep it wet. So this may not be something you can get to during class time, I doubt, just with the time, but also because you probably want to get a bunch more of something like this or some sort of jars to keep your paint active. Because anytime you do a line like this is like a kind of a multiplication table, right? That this color is going to be the mix, well, it's the mix of this and this, but this color right here is the mix of this, which you've mixed, and this, which you've mixed, and there's another mix. So this is a very kind of confusing project. It's this hopefully keeps you kind of mapped on and situated, and organization is really important to this, as well as just your kind of mixing skills. And I would suggest that you maybe try and find a good solid time to try and do this. So because of keeping the paint alive, like if you have a good part in your schedule, let's say, maybe 2 or 3 hours on a Sunday or something like that, where you can kind of devote yourself to it, I think that would go a long way to kind of making this be a good way to do it. So the idea of this project here, you're going to ending up with 25 squares. It's really to explore the full range of saturation with also this other component of kind of white. And then you're getting all these colors in here, which are these things we talked about called bridge tones. And this is also a kind of a sense of a full harmony, which is like that last one, an idea of complements, and then some white, so you can kind of vary some of the value, and then this kind of mixed of the two complements, the primary and the complement, to get a kind of dark. It's kind of like a real complete color world in a way. And some of these colors you'll find are just incredibly kind of beautiful. Mechanically, it's telling you how to do them, but you'll see that some of these kind of subtle kind of dovey grays or kind of dark grays that could go a little purple or a little more yellow are really kind of quite beautiful in a way. And it's a way to kind of construct the whole color world. And you're being also tuned to being more sensitive to seeing how, what these differences are. That's what a lot of these projects are. It's not just to make it, it's actually to see it and, tune your eyes to it. So the main idea is try and keep it as even as possible when you end up curating it and cutting it out. This is a really hard project. I know that. And I always tell everyone, this is probably the hardest